When the church started to grow, it wasn't a blessing to me personally.
In fact, I did not become aware of the girl's age until the news broke last week. I was stunned.
When the abuse against Cindy Clemencher first came to light, church leaders stood firm, claiming they had no knowledge of the situation. They acted shocked, devastated even, as if they were blindsided by the news. They wore remorse like a mask, trying to appear completely unaware. It was almost as though they thought no one would notice their hypocrisy. But now, with new court documents being released, the truth is coming to the surface, and it's worse than anyone imagined. These leaders knew. They knew all along. Instead of taking responsibility and doing what was right, they chose to protect their power, their reputation, and their image. They were more concerned about saving face than confronting the uncomfortable truth. Now that the truth is finally emerging, it's time for it to be revealed, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Before I continue, I want to bring to your attention that Gateway Church has since changed its elders. None of the men previously mentioned are currently part of the leadership, which feels like a cleansing process. Robert Morris, a key figure in the story, admits in his own filing that he informed the Gateway elders about the abuse in 2005, 2007, and 2011. What did they do? They didn't address it. They didn't confront him. Instead, they held meetings, but the purpose of these meetings wasn't to address the abuse. It was to protect the church's reputation and cover up the situation. Morris even recounts his actions in one of these meetings, admitting to and petting Cindy Clemencher when she was just 2 weeks shy of her 13th birthday. This was no misunderstanding. Morris admitted to it, and yet the church leaders did nothing. They knew about the abuse and still chose to protect him rather than confront the truth. In 2011, Morris himself distributed an official statement to the Gateway elders, admitting to inappropriate conduct with Clemencher, yet the elders chose silence over action. Leaders like Jimmy Evans, James Robison, and Jack Hayford, who were supposed to uphold the values they preached, chose to cover up the situation. James Robison later had the audacity to post a video claiming he didn't know Cindy was underage, but the documents tell a different story. He, along with the other elders, had access to the official statement and knew about the abuse. This hypocrisy is staggering. These leaders knew about the abuse, and instead of acting, they chose to protect their own image. Now that the truth is out, it's clear they were complicit in the cover-up. It's time for them to take responsibility. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
I was aware that Robert had moral failure in his past, but I had no idea it was a crime involving a child. This is totally unacceptable. In fact, I did not become aware of the girl's age until the news broke last week. I was stunned. The way Robert handled it was absolutely incorrect. It was wrong. Abuse of a child should not be tolerated.
James Robison claims he wasn't aware that Clemmy Shire was underage, but let's break this down for a second. Back in 2011, when Robison was an elder at Gateway Church, an official document was issued to all the elders. In this document, Robert Morris openly admitted to the abuse, describing how he and pet Clemmy when she was just 2 weeks shy of her 13th birthday. This wasn't some rumor, it was in black and white. So how can Robison now claim in a video from last year that he had no idea about Clemmy's age? The court documents paint a very different picture than what he's saying. Either Robison is completely out of touch with the facts, or more likely, he's lying to cover his own tracks. Then there's Jimmy Evans, who's become notorious for stepping in when a high-profile Christian leader needs to cover up a scandal. Time and time again, Evans has used his spiritual language to downplay these situations, almost as if a prophecy can somehow make everything right. He did it for Joni Lamb, and many of us have heard the recordings where Jonathan Lamb exposed Evans defending Doug Weiss and Joni. It's like clockwork with him. He steps in, spins the story, and gives these leaders a so-called word from God, as if that somehow erases their wrongdoings. And Robert Morris himself has shared how Evans gave him a prophecy while he was dealing with his own mess. It's all part of a pattern.
Because of the shame that was in my life from my past, when the church started to grow, it wasn't a blessing to me personally. It bothered me. I go places people would know me. Books started selling, television started taking off. Everywhere I'd go, people would come up to me. You can't imagine the shame I felt. Jimmy Evans called me one day. He said, Robert, I have a word from God for you. So I was praying this morning. He said, you believe a lie. He said, the more the church grows, the more scared you get. Because Satan's telling you the bigger you are, the harder you're going to fall.
Jimmy Evans, who was an elder at Gateway Church during the years when Robert Morris's actions were being covered up, made a bold claim in June 2024. He stated that he was shocked and devastated by the revelations of Morris's abuse, claiming that he only knew about an affair that Morris had with a woman in his early 20s. Evans went on to say that he had no idea about the allegations raised by Cindy Clemencher. But now, with court documents revealing the truth, it's clear that Evans's statement doesn't hold water. Court documents have exposed that as far back as 2007, Evans was sitting in meetings where the issue of Morris and Clemencher was discussed. In those meetings, Morris openly retold his version of events leading up to 1987, admitting to the abuse. Evans was there and he knew about it. He was part of the leadership team that chose to ignore the truth and protect Morris from the consequences of his actions. Yet suddenly, in 2024, Evans claims to be shocked and blindsided by the news. How is that even possible? It's infuriating to think that after all these years, Evans would have the audacity to claim ignorance. How could he have been unaware when the documentation shows otherwise? These leaders who were supposed to represent integrity and truth were complicit in the cover-up, and now they're scrambling to save face. In response to the court documents, Evans released a statement where he attempted to exonerate himself. In this statement, he claims that Morris had told him that Cindy Clemencher was 16 years old at the time of the abuse, which of course is a convenient and highly questionable defense. This tactic is a classic example of minimizing the situation, shifting the blame, and distancing oneself from the consequences. Instead of taking responsibility for his actions and his role in the cover-up, Evans is trying to deflect and make Morris the scapegoat. The truth is now in the open, and no amount of spin or vague statements can change the reality. Evans, along with others, was complicit in covering up the abuse. Another key figure in this cover-up is Tom Lane. Like Evans, Lane also acted shocked and surprised when the truth came to light. However, the court documents clearly show that Lane, along with the other elders, knew full well about Cindy Clemencher's age at the time of the abuse. But instead of acting, Lane chose to play the role of the surprised bystander, pretending he didn't know what was going on. It's maddening to watch these men act as though they were innocent bystanders, when in reality they spent years covering up the abuse, protecting their friend, and shielding the church's image, all while allowing the victim to suffer in silence. The documents don't lie, and the timeline is clear. These men knew exactly what had been happening, and yet they chose to cover it up. It's also undeniable that the victims, like Cindy Clemencher, have suffered long enough without the church taking responsibility. Just because someone stands behind a pulpit or holds a title of authority doesn't automatically make them trustworthy. Far too often, we've been told to simply trust those in positions of power, pastors, elders, leaders, because they're supposed to be the ones who lead us with integrity and truth. But what we're seeing here is a stark example of how power and status can be easily abused. Leaders, especially in the church, have a responsibility to act with integrity and set an example for others to follow. When they fail to do so, when they lie, cover up, and protect their own interests at the expense of the truth, it becomes our responsibility as a community to call them out. These leaders were entrusted with the well-being of their congregation, yet they failed in the most critical way. The church should be a place of truth, justice, and protection, not one where the vulnerable are ignored for the sake of maintaining power and reputation. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's essential, and it's time for these leaders to be held accountable for their actions.